My name is Mats Gjedde, and I'm glad you've joined me today for this exciting tutorial. I'm one of the creators behind Grunt, a powerful presentation system that is built directly into PowerPoint. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make a great looking chart in Grunt. Let's have a look at what we will be making. We will create the chart you see in this slide. In addition to the chart, we have extra information, such as bubbles at the top and rectangles at the bottom. With regular tools, it takes time to get data into these bubbles, and you have to manually align them. That's just tedious. You'll see that Grunt supports a better way of working with these items. So, let's get started. I have prepared a business case in Excel, and I'll start by importing the data into PowerPoint. Importing data with Grunt is as easy as selecting the range you want to import, press Ctrl+C to copy the range, move over to PowerPoint and press Ctrl+V to paste. A grunt is pasted into your presentation and it is automatically linked to your data. If you press the Excel icon on the right, you'll see the workbook that contains your data and the range Grunt is keeping an eye on. This is the range we selected from Excel. Remember, you can use the edit buttons in this dialog if you later want to change your data range. One of the great things about the powerful data connection in Grunt is that you actually don't need to have the same structure in your Excel file and the output you present in PowerPoint. In this case, I've added a column that supports my modeling in Excel, but I don't need to display that column in PowerPoint. I can simply right-click the column and choose Delete. Changing the structure like this will not destroy your data connection, and Grunt is smart enough to deal with these differences. By default, the Grunt that is imported into your presentation looks a bit bland, but I'll show you how easy it is to change the look and feel. Grunt reads basic formatting from Excel, but you're also able to add formatting inside of PowerPoint. We actually recommend that you keep your Excel file the way you want to support modeling and analysis, and leave more complicated formatting to the workflow in PowerPoint. I want to insert a chart inside this Grunt. To do so, I select the area where I want the chart to appear, right-clicks and selects Add Modifier. Modifiers are unique to Grunt, and they enable you to work more efficiently. They can be simple and let you change your font color, or they can be more advanced, such as transforming your data into visual representations. In this case, I want a chart, so I'll type that in the search field. Among all the available options, I think I'll go for a column chart, so I'll double-click that option. A window appears with all the settings I can use to change the look and feel of my chart. From this dialog, I can add axes, labels, or other parts you would expect from a chart. Notice that the data was automatically transformed into a chart in Grunt, and that the chart fits into the available space. If I want to give my chart a bit more space, I can select the row and drag this handle to increase the row height. As I do so, notice that all the other rows scale dynamically to fit. This is due to Grunt's flexible layout system that makes it much more convenient to lay out your designs. When I release the mouse button, the size of the chart is updated accordingly. I could also type a weight directly into this box. If I type 5 and press enter, that will size this row to be exactly 5 times as tall as the default row with weight 1. This gives you great control of the final result. If I want to change the color on my chart, I can press the color selector and see all the available color schemes that are built into Grunt. These are great to use if you have multiple data series in your chart. In this case, I only have one data series, and I want to choose my exact color. In Grunt, you can switch between different setting modes with the help of these small rectangles to the right of the settings. If I right-click the blue button, I can choose Single Color, and then I get the default color picker from PowerPoint. Here I can select the color I want, for instance this green shade I like. Now it's time for me to add labels to my chart, and I'll do so by right-clicking the chart and choosing Show Total Labels. You'll notice that the labels appear instantly. If I double-click the chart, I can bring back the settings dialog, and I could also have turned on the labels from here. The labels, though, are a bit too granular for my taste. Grunt automatically imports your number formatting from Excel, so I could head over to Excel and change the precision there. But I actually prefer to keep this precision when I do my calculations. I can rather override the number formatting from inside of PowerPoint. I scroll down to the number format settings, which enables me to scale the figures to a different magnitude, for instance millions, and display this with a single decimal digit. That looks a lot better. Now, I need to do something about the formatting of my header column. I double-click the column to change the sizing of the column to automatic. This means that the column will rescale automatically to make room for contents. Note that this mode is dynamic, so if I later change the content, the width of the column will change appropriately. I want to make my text bold. In Grunt, I make changes to formatting by adding a modifier, but for simplicity, I can also press the hotkey Ctrl+B. This makes the text bold, because Grunt added a modifier for me and applied the bold style. This also enables me to do more advanced stuff with this modifier, such as saying that the bold text should only apply to the first paragraph of each row. When I do so, you see that the first line gets bold, but not the second. This is really convenient and a great way to work with formatting. Given that I previously changed the units of my chart labels, I want to communicate this to the reader. To do so, I need to edit the cell contents in my header column. I right-click the cell and choose Edit Data. A data editor will appear directly in PowerPoint, containing all the data that Grunt has read from Excel. You cannot change your Excel data from within PowerPoint, but Grunt actually allows you to override individual cell values. Be warned though, we usually don't recommend this if your data comes from Excel. You should strive to update your source data if at all possible, but we also know that sometimes you're just in a hurry and you want to do some quick changes. I can select this cell, go into the formula bar and start to type new text. When I'm done, I press the green check mark. I have now overridden the data in this cell. Grunt still reads any updates to this cell from Excel, but it will not be displayed as long as you have these local overrides. We display these yellow markers in every overridden cell to warn you about these overrides. And if you want to remove them and get back to the underlying data, you simply select the cell and press the delete key on your keyboard. I want to keep the local overrides for now, so I'll revert back by undoing my last operation. Back in my slide, you can also see that the cell picked up the bold formatting I applied earlier, showcasing some of the power behind the modifiers. You are now much more free to do things in the order that suits you the best. I also want to rearrange the columns and rows in my Grunt, and notice how easy it is. I select a column and drag it to the right. The years can go beneath the chart, the growth rate can go up top, and I'll rearrange these rows as well. If I want to add bubbles to my growth rate, that is quite easy. I don't need to manually align these or spend time getting my data inside of shapes. I rather select the area where I want them to appear, press Ctrl-Enter to open up the Modify dialog, and type in shape. When I apply the modifier, a shape will be wrapped around my text. I can then choose ellipse as the shape type, and perhaps also change the size, setting this to a relative width of the column. 60% ought to be fine. The shape gets a default dark background, and the text is white to make it legible. If you change the fill to a lighter shade, the text color will become dark for your convenience. If I don't want to display shapes in these cells where the cells are empty, I can add a condition for empty cells to my exclusion list. This way I inform Grunt about my intent, and Grunt can go on to work ensuring that I'll never get bubbles in empty cells. I also want to add some rounded rectangles down here, so I'll add the shapes and change the width to match the bubbles. What you see here is that the text is now too wide for the rectangles. To deal with this, I'll select the shapes and add a number format modifier to this part as well. For the bubbles, I want the number format to be a multiple. We actually have a preset for that built in, which is quite convenient for financial analysis. I will have to add a unit to this cell as well. And to deal with that, I'll use the inline editor instead of opening up the big data editor. I select the cell, press E on my keyboard, and make my changes. When I'm done, I press outside the cell to commit my edits. As expected, the column will resize to match the new text width automatically. The last thing I want to do is to center the text in these columns. So I'll select them, open up the modify dialog, and search for a line. In the alignment modifier, I can choose to center the text. Now it's time to move the grunt into the final design. I'll right-click on the grunt and choose copy. Then I'll navigate to a slide that I have already prepared, and I'll press Ctrl V to paste. I need to resize the grunt, and as I do so, notice how the resizing of the individual items is really good compared to what you're used to in PowerPoint. Nevertheless, I'm not totally satisfied with the width of these objects. They are a bit too narrow for my taste. I could go into the individual modifiers and change the size, but I prefer to do this for all the graphics at once. So I'll select the columns, add a size modifier, and change the width to be 90% instead of 60%. Now the sizing is much better, in my opinion. However, this also affected the chart elements, which I didn't want. So I select the chart and add it to the exclusion list through the top suggestion. It is time to make the colors right and fit the final design. To help me, I have this image with colors that I like to use to be consistent. It is located right outside of the screen, and I'll use the color picker in Grunt to choose the appropriate color. Grunt's color picker is capable of choosing colors from any of your screens. So I'll double click the chart, and I want this green color for the chart. Then I'll change the bubbles to a different shade of gray. And finally, the rectangles to another shade of gray. I also want to change the font color. I add a font modifier, go into the color, and pick a gray color for the font as well. However, I don't want the titles in my header column to be this light. I could add a new modifier to deal with this, but I actually already have a modifier targeting this area. So I'll go back to that modifier and change the color, rather than adding a new one. But even if I make the color red, it won't show up. And the reason is that this modifier is located down here, and I have the other modifier up here. And whenever you have two modifiers that applies to the same property and the same area, the one at the top wins. So if I grab the bottommost modifier and move it to the top of the stack, you'll notice that the text turns red, which is what I want. Except I don't actually want it to be red, but rather a darker shade of gray. Something like that. I also want to change the size of the secondary items in the header column. So I'll add a font modifier with a font size of 10 that targets all the text in the column except for the first paragraph. Finally, I have a custom shape I want to use to highlight the final rectangle in my chart. I'll drag that into the presentation and I can move it to a suitable location. Now I'm starting to get quite pleased with the design, but I want to ensure that the data connection is still working as expected. So I'll go back to Excel and I'll make some changes. For instance, I can change the number of sold pieces in this column from 4,000 to 6,000. That will change the growth rate as well. I save my Excel workbook and the changes will be pushed to PowerPoint, where Grunt will pick it up. Back in PowerPoint, you will notice that this yellow warning indicates that you have new data available. We don't automatically update your grunts because we want you to stay in control. But when you choose to update the data, it will appear as expected. It will recalculate the data, it will rescale the chart, and the best thing is that Grunt will manage to do this even though we have completely changed the structure between the Excel file and the PowerPoint file, which is quite awesome and a huge time saver. And that wraps up this tutorial. We now have a great looking chart that it is easy to update. And I hope you got a good impression of the power of Grunt. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time.